This drawing of the Arc de Triomphe presented many challenges, in fact so many challenges that I decided to turn it into a video showing how I work to disguise errors when I'm drawing directly in ink, because obviously if we're doing a pencil outline first and we get things wrong, well, we just erase the lines and put them in the right place. But when we draw directly in ink, it can be more challenging. And I find that I've developed lots of little tricks to try and minimize the impact of mistakes I make. So with a shape as, in general terms, simple as the Arc de Triomphe, the challenge is to get the proportions right, and particularly the perspective angles. And this one I'm doing now across the top of the bases, I've angled down too steeply. That causes problems then when I do the lines above, because the angles have to always increase as the lines get higher above eye level, and this line above doesn't really increase enough, the line that's just above this arch that I've just drawn now. So that's a bit of a problem, and what I end up working to do is to try to flatten the line across the tops of both of the sides of the arch. I don't do that yet because I haven't yet realized how it looks just a bit too much to leave. At this point though, I'm just working on some of the relief sculptures on the front. The other problem I have is that I make the left hand side of the arch a bit too narrow in relation to the right hand side, and so I also have to work with the right hand side to slightly decrease the size of it and at the same time to increase the size of the left hand side. So I position this light post in first because I need to draw the detail on the arch behind it. So as I do this box inside the top of the left hand side, that tells me the proportions aren't quite right because it's not long enough. It's more obvious when we start to do shapes within shapes that the proportions aren't exactly what we want them to be. At this stage I'm thinking, oh, should I continue this or keep drawing? But I decide to keep drawing, and as I usually advise people to do, I'm glad I did, because I think I probably managed to rescue in some ways some of the worst effects of the lines in the wrong place. But for now I'm just working on the underside of the arch. It's important that whatever decorations we put here follow the perspective angles of the surface that the relief sculptures are carved onto. I also now do this other lamppost because it's also going to get in the way. Now notice I'm starting to push my extreme left hand lines across further. So, and now I position this top angle. I've had to make the angle a bit high to compensate for the fact that one of my lower angles is too high, which means the angles above it have to be bumped up. Put the last of the lampposts in and decide to get the side of the arch in place. These angles are very extreme. These are the ones that sometimes it's hardest to draw accurately. So a little bit of the detail. When we do detail across like that, I actually dropped those little shadow squares across as I went from left to right. I made the line that they form slightly lower than the line I'd drawn, and that's another way to emphasize the line that we want rather than the line that we have drawn. Now I don't position these well. I finished up with not enough space to squeeze another one in, but I did in the end split the difference between the last couple and had some close together. I thought that would be less obvious than an overly wide space. So now again I'm just trying to slightly reposition the space for this frieze, and again I'm using this row of lines this time to actually raise it slightly, not to lower it. So by adjusting the upper and lower lines with the detail, I've managed to create a better shape to put that sculptural frieze in that runs right the way along the top. I also push the left-hand side of what I'm working on now across further. So I put the frame even further across, and then I use some of the sculptures to hide the lines that I originally drew to be the framing. And I'm still pushing the detail across. And now I do another line along the top here of detail, and again I pull it down slightly to try and minimize the overly exaggerated wedge shape which has happened in this top part of my drawing. So it's a case of continually redrawing lines and taking opportunities that either the detail of the drawing gives you, or that you can create yourself without it looking out of place. Notice how much I've pushed that left-hand side across. There's about 5 lines there, it looks like, from here at the moment. At the end though, I don't think they're as obvious as they felt when I first did the line in the wrong place, and then put the other ones on. Now I'm doing these figures along here. Now this is a really great example of drawing the effect of what we see. I'm not trying to draw figures. It's way too small a scale, even if I had the ability to. I'm trying to create the effect of heads, the effect of bodies, and the effect of horses. And so if you look in more detail the way I've done that, you'll see the way I've done that. It's very important when things are of overwhelming detail, like the leaves of a tree, that we draw the effect. We don't draw the actual shapes. So now I'm just finishing the underside decorations here. Again, I'm continually redefining the outer frame of this left-hand relief sculpture. I just did another line to drop the rectangle a bit lower, and now I'm making adjustments to the angle here. See, I go from higher on the left-hand side to lower on the right, and I do the same thing on the right-hand side. So it's a case of just shifting all the lines a little bit in whatever direction we can to create the effect that's more accurate for the perspective angles that we want. Now I'm doing these giant relief sculptures on the front. Again, I just want to create the effect. There's way too much detail to try and draw, but if I can give the sense of some heads, some wings, some arms outstretched, some legs trailing out behind, that's all I'm trying to do. Now the detail at the very base of the arc is hidden by people and cars and whatnot. I've decided not to draw the cars, but to include some of the people, because I want to give a scale of just how massive this structure is. So just finishing some of these details. I think the gap between the left-hand side of the right-hand side of the arc and the right-hand side of the left-hand side is just a little bit too wide. The space that we see between the two sides is a little bit too wide for the reference, for the angle we're looking at it from. So now I work at getting this arched piercing that goes the other direction through the sides, and then some of the figures. So I'm looking at this, trying to work out exactly what I'm going to do. I'm looking at my reference, and I think I'm going to accentuate the trees that we see in the background, make them a bit darker, and use that to slightly redefine where the edge of the arch is. So I've got that in my head now as I do the other relief, and I need to position this between basically the lamppost, which hides the right hand side of this side of the arch, and the furthest to the left line that I've drawn, not the closer one, which was my initial line for where this side of the arch would end. and by positioning this in the center of the two lines I want it to be in the center of, it does help give more emphasis to the line that I want to be using, that extreme left-hand side. And so a little more working out where these lampposts go. They're actually a lot closer to us than anything else in the drawing besides the tree that's I'm going to draw on the left-hand side. So now I work on this very dark hatching that, if you like, is a way of emphasizing which of all these lines is the actual line of the edge of the arch. And so there are many, many lines here that I've drawn incorrectly, at the wrong angle, in the wrong place, not far enough to one side. And I think it's, in the end, far less obvious at the end with our drawing if we put the lines in the right place so that our brain can see those and focus on those. You'll notice with the those decorations along the very top band of the arch, where I didn't space the circles, for want of a better word, the medallion designs equally, that we really don't notice that on the extreme right hand side. It's more important to get the center ones in the right place, because they're the ones that we see most easily, most obviously, so we can worry too much about things. Now again, with the trees here, this gives me a chance just to emphasize exactly what line I want, and you'll see I've actually pulled that line slightly the other direction. I do have some earlier lines, millimeter, 2 millimeters to the left of where I've come down more heavily. And if you look up above that line, you'll see in that top right corner of decoration above the actual arch, where there's that figure with a trumpet, I actually pushed that sculptural relief a little bit further to the right as well, so that I could reduce the width of that space and match it more closely to the space on the other side. It's a little less accurate to the reference, but at this stage it's more important that I get those two spaces looking in the right proportion to each other for this angle of viewing. So I've, on the one hand, increased the width of the top left-hand rectangular space, but on the top right-hand side, I've decreased the space slightly. So it's, shaving off a little bit here, adding a little bit there, shifting this angle slightly here, shifting this angle the other way to overall get the difference, get the effect that we want. So again now, just looking at details to do, finishing this tree. And I hope you can see now that none of these mistakes look nearly as obvious as when I first made them. That with all the lines of a finished drawing, that's the other way we can mitigate against the impact of wrong lines. At the end, we simply have a lot of lines. And these lines help disguise any one line. They draw the attention, and if we have at least some parts in the right place, then then our ability to see any one line and to see it in the wrong place is much more reduced. Some strong tonal values will also draw the eye. So I darkened the underside of this arch, and I probably should have darkened it just a bit more in the upper section, upper front section, and that would have even more drawn the eye to one of the better spaces, because that actual arch curve turned out quite well. So if I darken the tonal value with more hatching there, it will even more attract the eye to a part that is more successful in a drawing sense, and that will also take attention away from the multiple lines on the left hand side of the arch. So what do you think? Do you think I've managed to disguise it? G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you found this helpful. I hope you found it encouraging that I don't get everything right first time. And a lot of learning to draw is learning to overcome things that don't quite work out. So why not print off this reference from my community page and give it a go? But look, whatever you're drawing and however you're drawing it and however many mistakes you make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.